Hi, I'm Mark Govan with ABC Tropical Plant Nursery and host of Florida Gardening, a radio program on 970WFLA.com. Today we're going to talk about planting Plumerias from cuttings. Well, one of the first things that we're going to need to do today is we're going to have a Plumeria plant that needs cutting, and this Plumeria plant I have next to me has two arms on it, and what we're going to do is we're going to end up using one of these arms as our cutting material. Secondly, we're going to need a new pot to put the Plumeria cutting in, and we're going to use a stewy pot for planting our cutting. Then we're also going to be cutting using my Falco pruners to actually make the cut off of the Plumeria plant. It's very important to have a good, strong pair of pruning shears in making your cuts. And then, of course, we're always going to label our cutting after we plant it with our plant label right here and pencil. We're going to make sure we label our plant once we do the cutting. So let's go ahead and get started. And the first thing that we're going to do is we want to decide which cutting on this particular plant is worth taking off. Well, I will look at the plant and I like the long straight one on this side. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take this side off. Now normally with a cutting this long, I can make two cuts on this particular Plumeria, giving me two separate plants. So one, if I cut here, this will be what we call the tip cutting, and this end here would be my stem cutting. Let's start with the tip cutting right now. Using my Falco pruners, I'm going to take my first cut on my Plumeria, and one thing I always like to do is cut straight up and down whenever I make my cutting, just because if for some reason I'm going to leave this particular branch on the plant, that it's always straight up and down with the ground here. We want to make sure it's straight up and down. So here we go, here's our first cut, and we're going to go just like that. As you notice, you're going to see the Plumeria will leak after you cut it. It has a milky white sap that will leak out of the plant. Don't worry about that, that's fine. After the cutting has been made, in order to root this section, we're going to go ahead and remove any existing leaves from the cutting itself. So we'll take all these leaves off the cutting, and I'll leave the one tiny leaf that's just coming out. I'm going to go ahead and leave that leaf on. Now, one thing that's also important, anytime we take a fresh cutting from a Plumeria, is that we need to let the bottom end callus over. So what I normally do is I'll store this cutting in a cool, dry place for 3 or 4 days to allow this new cutting area to go ahead and callus over on me. Now, just for you, I've went ahead and already done that with another cutting that I have, so we'll continue with one of the cuttings I took 3 or 4 days ago that's already had an opportunity to harden, we call hardened off. And this cutting is hardened off at this time. Now, this cutting happens to be a stem cutting on a plant, meaning it has no tip end, as this one has. This has a tip end and you know which end is up. However, on this one, you would not know unless you look at the leaf scars on the plant. And a smile on a leaf scar is right side up, and a frown will mean that if the leaf scar looks like a frown, that means it's upside down. So we will know this is the proper orientation for this to be put into a container. All right, so the next thing we're going to need is a stewy pot, and this is just a brand of pot. It could be a 1-gallon pot or a stewy pot. I just happen to like the smaller pots for rooting my cuttings. And we're going to fill this stewy pot up with dirt right to the top. The mixture of dirt that I'm using today is a peat and perlite mixture, and it's I found it to be a very good mix. 2/3 peat, 1/3 perlite works very well for rooting my Plumerias. Now this might spill a little bit here, which is going to happen, but that's okay. We just want to fill this pot right up to the top, and there we go. That's enough. All right, once the pot has been filled to the top, I'm going to go ahead and insert this cutting straight down into the center, pushing all the way down until it reaches about 3 or 4 inches down into the pot. I'm going to hold it up straight and use my finger to actually keep the cutting in the center of the pot. I'm going to tamp this soil down, keeping the actual cutting right there in the center. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and water this cutting, and one time just to orient it, and then I'm going to take this and put it out in full sun. Very important to keep it out in full sun. Now in about 2 to 3 weeks, this is going to start actually sending up leaves. You won't need to do any more watering. Everything is stored inside this cutting in order for the plant to produce its first leaves. After the leaves come out, then it's going to start producing roots. Once the roots appear, and a lot of times you're going to be able to see those roots right at the base of the pot itself, at that point you can start watering your plant. You really don't need to do any watering until that time. This is the easy way to start our cuttings, and this is how we do it in the nursery. Hey, I'm Mark Govan with ABC Tropical Plant Nursery, hoping you love Plumerias as much as we do.